Howdy, howdy, howdy. I'm a little bit late because I was playing with my lighting, and I realized I need to get new lighting in my apartment. Um, hi, we are diving into all things emotional eating today on our live video. And so if you're on Facebook, you can comment in the little thing on the side of your phone, and I can answer in real time live, which is awesome. And if you were watching the recording, thanks for watching. And we are diving into so many incredible tips around emotional eating. Let me just preface this by saying there are so many, like if you Google how to stop emotional eating or how to let go of emotional eating, there are like a bazillion articles out there. So there are tons of different angles you can come at this from, and this is something I'll continue to talk about because it's something that's really, really important, because emotions are so closely linked to our food that it's worth looking at again and again and again because it takes practice. So, okay. So I'm going to give you sort of 5 tips, strategies, whatever you want to call them, to let go of emotional eating. And I like to say let go of emotional eating because we don't just stop emotional eating. So we don't just like, all right, hi Christina. So we don't just like the end, I'm never going to emotionally eat again. We let go of it, meaning that if we're going to stop something, we start something else instead. And so it's important to know that, because I think a lot of times we can get really, really mad at ourselves in the sense that like, oh my gosh, I've emotionally eaten again, or I'm really angry and I went for the ice cream pint again. And it's like, if we don't have other tools or coping mechanisms in place, then of course we're going to emotionally eat because that's our coping mechanism. So throughout this process, we'll talk about what to do instead of eating. And I think that's key, because so much of the time we're just like, I haven't stopped emotional eating. But if we're coming at it from that place of like, you know, that rule we're making for ourselves of just like, yeah, I'm going to stop binging, I'm going to stop eating sugar, I'm going to stop eating this, I'm going to just stop emotionally eating. It's just another rule we've placed on ourselves. And it's like, we all know how it goes with food rules or other rules. We're like, we want to break them. So keep that in the back of your mind. Hi, Amanda. The other thing I want to say before diving into the 5 tips is that dealing with emotions is like learning a new language. And this is one of my favorite metaphors, even though I probably say this is one of my favorite metaphors about every metaphor that I ever say, but it really is a good one. And emotions are, we don't grow up learning how to deal with our emotions. We don't grow up learning how to express ourselves for the most part. You know, think about when you're a kid. It's like you get punished for throwing a temper tantrum. You get rewarded with food if you're good. You get rewarded for playing nicely. You are told like not to, you know, throw a temper tantrum or get angry, like to keep it all inside. Hi, Mindy. Yay. So many people are joining. Hi, guys. So it's like we are essentially relearning how to deal with emotions, because we grow up not learning how to express. We learn how to keep it all inside. And so when we open this box, it's like, oh, it's a new way of looking at emotions. We're not using food. We're expressing them in a much different way. So it is different and it is unfamiliar. And going in knowing that is a huge burden lifted off your chest, because you know that it will be unfamiliar and you know that it will be different. And so I spent, and this is my metaphor that I love. So I spent a year in Ecuador living with a family, going in thinking I knew Spanish. You know, I'd take it in high school, I'd take it in college. Yay me, I know Spanish. I remember the first night I was there, the dad of the house came in and explained the shower and told me how to turn everything on. And I was like, I just stared at him. I was just like, I have literally no idea what he was saying. And it was such a good lesson, because learning Spanish, you learn the vocabulary and you learn the days of the week and you learn how to construct sentences and the tenses, and it's like all so unfamiliar at first. You're like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. But it's like a snowball effect. So as you get more used to it, it gets easier and it gets more familiar, and you know what to do and you know your triggers. So keep that in the back of your mind, is that like emotions truly, it's like learning a new language. And when we are doing it, it requires patience. You know, you're not going to get angry and then have this perfect response to anger, express to your significant other how you feel, and then like, boom, I know how to handle anger now. It's like, you know, it might be messy, it might be chaotic, it might be like, oh my God, that came out so wrong and I have to apologize. But it's like, that's part of the learning process. So That's what I want you to remember going in, and when you're learning, and when you're experimenting, and when you're practicing emotions and dealing with emotions. Okay, so I have my little notes here. There's 5 things I want to talk about. And anyway, feel free to comment questions if you have them as we go. I'd be happy to answer. If it's a situation you want to explore about how to handle something emotionally, type it in the chat box. So the first is, and this is my favorite because this took me like a bazillion years to learn, and I wish I'd just known it from day one, is that you've got to be willing to be uncomfortable. So when we think of uncomfortableness, if that's a word, we always think of that it's bad. There's something wrong with us, or something wrong if we feel discomfort. And just think about our society is that we never can be alone with ourselves. It's like there's TVs in the elevators, and we're walking with our smartphones down the street, and we're on the train on our phones, or we're always distracted. We're always in this sense of being drawn out externally. And so when you begin to process your emotions, which we'll talk about how to do that in the next couple steps, but there is this discomfort of like, oh my God, I'm lonely. Like, what does it feel like? I don't know. I've always used food for it, and now I'm exploring what that feels like, and it will be uncomfortable. But uncomfortable doesn't mean bad. I think a lot of the times actually, and this was very true for me, like when I first allowed myself to start to experience emotions, I was terrified of the intensity of my emotions. Like if I somehow, like we feel like we're not capable of dealing with our emotions, so we use food. And the fear around, if we open the box, if we just open ourselves up, like it's just going to be this like hurricane of crazy, intense, unmanageable emotions. And so what I want you to remember around this is that there can be a period for some people where it is a little bit chaotic and a little bit like, oh yeah, the stuff's bubbling up. Like a champagne bottle, you open the cork, it's like stuff bubbles up. But once that stuff bubbles over, it's sort of, there's kind of a sense of calm around it and a sense of ease. So emotions do subside and the intensity does diminish. But in order to know that and not have it be just me saying it, you've got to experience it on your own, because all of this stuff that I'm talking about is about you getting your own experience with it and you getting like, oh, okay, I get what she's saying, not intellectually, but in my bones. I know it in my body that yes, my emotion did dissipate. The intensity was really intense maybe at first, but then it sort of faded away. And think of emotions like as energy. Emotions are just energy. It's like a wave, wave rising and cresting and then just going back into the ocean. Emotions are like that. We don't get angry and stay angry forever. We might hold on to a little bit of that resentment or something, but like we don't feel that intense anger. We don't feel that intense loneliness or sadness forever. So I think the willingness to be uncomfortable can take you so far in this process, because you aren't expecting like, oh, I'm just going to have rainbows and butterflies all the time and it's never going to be, I'm never going to feel anything. It's like we're humans. There is an ebb and flow to life. There is an up and a down, and there's not this, we achieve a state of happiness and like stay there forever. Things happen, life happens, stress happens, unexpected things happen, like everything happens, but it doesn't mean there's something wrong if we're feeling an emotion about that. And so that was also a big one for me. I felt like there was something wrong with me. Like if I felt unsettled, or if I felt anxious, or if I felt like any emotion, sadness, I felt like I shouldn't feel it because, oh, my life was great. I had a great job and a great family and a great relationship. So why should I feel sadness? The reality is, though, is that you can feel a million different things at once, and to allow yourself to do that, to feel that, to be that, because the allowing is what helps you really let it go and process it and allow it to just move through you. Because when you're resisting it, that what you resist persists phrase. It's like when you're fighting the fact that you shouldn't feel sad, or that you shouldn't feel pissed off, or that you shouldn't feel mad at your boss or your significant other. It's like that's when we get in that sort of conundrum, because we feel mad, but then we feel like we shouldn't feel mad, and then we're mad at ourselves for like feeling like we shouldn't, and all this whole crazy judgment, criticism, madness, like a bazillion things going on, and we're like, where do we even start? So that's the first piece. The second piece of this is once you know that there will be some discomfort on this path, I want you to explore the feeling. And so this is an incredible step because it can open up like an entire new world where you get in touch with and you explore what the emotion feels like, where it is in your body, what it like is. Does it have a texture? Does it have a feeling? Is it a color? In my online program, I have this exercise like dealing or processing emotions, like a 3-step process to deal with your emotions, and it takes you like into this feeling of where it, like, is it in my heart, is it in my chest, in my belly, like in my neck, shoulders, like where is that feeling felt in my throat? And what this allows you to do, it gets you out of your head, number one, and gets you out of the like, oh my gosh, I'm angry, and then the story of like, well, my partner is an a-hole and he shouldn't have done this and she should have done that and she shouldn't have said this, and all of the stuff that we carry on in our minds, like on and on and on. Like it gets you out of that and gets you into the feeling directly so you can experience the feeling directly. And that's where the magic happens, like seriously, because so much of it is in our heads. Like we just keep carrying it on. Christina says, lol. Yeah, so it is like the story in our heads just goes on and on and on about like crazy things. I do it all the time. Like my significant other will do something and I've like 2 days later, I'm still thinking about what he said and like, he shouldn't have said that. And I'm like, get over it. It's still in my head, just going on and on. But so it's like when you can get out of your head and physically feel that emotion, like think about little kids, best examples in the world for teaching us so many things about life, but they have an erratic, wild tantrum, and then 3 seconds later they're like happy-go-lucky playing with their trains. It's like they vent their emotions and then snap out of it. The emotion's gone. It's processed. It's released. Back to life. So naming it can also help. Just naming the feeling. And if you Google like list of emotions, there's tons of lists of like. Because I use the same one. I'm like angry, sad, mad, loneliness. Like I think of the same 5 and I always use them as examples. So I need to look at that list again. But there's so many different emotions. And when we can sometimes name it, like I feel unsettled. I still can't think of any. Let's think of a good one. I feel hesitant. I feel uncertain. Like there's so many emotions that we might feel but don't know. Like we can't just put a name to it. When I did Overeaters Anonymous years ago, they had this phrase, name it, claim it, let it go, which I love because it's like you name it, like, yep, I feel so angry at so-and-so. You claim it, like, yep, you name it, anger, you claim it, yep, I feel really angry at that person, and you kind of let it go. So the point of that is that like sometimes naming it, like really owning, like, oh yeah, that's how I feel, it allows us to stop pushing it away and to really like own it and not resist, and just when we own it and when we're like acknowledging it, yeah, that's how I feel, that can sometimes be enough to get over that resistance and actually let it go. So get curious about the feeling. Like hi Erica, get curious about what is going on emotionally for you, because this is where the shifts can happen. Because when you go into it from the mindset of being pissed off at yourself that you are feeling something, of wanting to go to the food but being mad at yourself because you want to go to the food, or like when you're in this critical, self-hating, self-loathing place, you never get anywhere because it's just like, we never get any shifts from that. But when we can get curious about it and say, hey, what is going on here for me? What is truly going on with this person, with this emotion, with this situation, with whatever is happening in my life that is causing me to want to eat over it? Okay, so second, explore the feeling. The third piece of this, asking yourself, what is it that you're wanting to fulfill? So any version of this question can be helpful. So it could be something like, what is it that I really need? What is it that I most want? What, and words matter. So like pick something that resonates with you to help you dig deeper into it. But essentially what you're asking is that if I went to the food, what need is this fulfilling for me? So think about like when you're depressed or when you're sad. It's like, maybe you want a hug. Maybe you want to play with your pet. Maybe you want to talk and connect. So like asking what need, and it could be something deeper like connection or intimacy or a good conversation, or could be something lighter like a piece of pizza, or no, that's food. Never mind, don't do that. We're trying not to go to food. So something like, I want to play with my pet. I want to go for a walk. I want to take a bubble bath. I want to go out with my friend for a glass of wine. Like whatever it is, it could be either. It could be like something really, really light and simple. It could be something deeper. For me, I found that the deeper needs are what really get to the heart of it. Like, so going for a walk could be great. And yes, it's a great coping mechanism. But like, what is it that you're really longing for? Like, what is it that if you're feeling lonely, is it connection? Is it a friend? Is it intimacy? Is it appreciation? Like, what is it that you're really deeply longing for? Because when you can start to get in touch with your deeper needs, it leads into the next step of how to get those needs met, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's like, this is where in order to stop and let go of the emotional eating, you have to find other ways to fulfill yourself emotionally. And it's like we need alternatives to food to turn to for that fulfillment. And so when you can start to go deeper into the like what you're truly longing for, it can then point you to what you need to what you can do to fulfill that need. So I hope that makes sense. So if it doesn't, pop it in the chat box. So the fourth step, so it's kind of 3 and 4 right in line with each other, is how can you begin to fulfill those needs? So like, how do you get your emotional needs met? And this is not like, okay, I feel this, I do this, the end. It's not like, there's different needs for different situations, and there's different things that'll work for you at different times in your life. And it's different. So it's not like you solve the puzzle and then you're done. It's learning how to read yourself and learning what works for you and what doesn't. And this is where experimentation comes in. And going back to the beginning, it's like, this is why I said it's like learning a language, because you don't just take a Spanish class and then you're done, you've gotten it. It's you practice, you make mistakes. You're like, oh no, that didn't work. And you're like, oh, but that did work. So it's like you get more and more familiar with yourself and your needs and what works for you. And that it's a snowball effect, because it gets easier. It's not like you then forget what works for you and what doesn't. It's like you once you know that in your bones. So what was I talking about? Totally lost my train of thought. All right, so getting your needs met. So what I've done, and this is a long time ago now, but I made a chart of like the big feelings I felt. So anxiety or sadness or being unsettled or loneliness. And I would literally put in options. Like I made a big like block chart of like, okay, here is sadness. What can I do when I'm sad? And like A, B, C, D, E. And use it as a reference guide to not go into the food. So like I had coping mechanisms with me to be like, okay, if I am tired, tired is a big one. So I totally forgot about this one. Tired. I don't know if tired is actually an emotion. Is it an emotion? But so many of the women I work with, like that's a huge trigger to eat. Like just being tired. Like you're a mom or you're working all day or both, and you get home and you put dinner on the table, you clean up, and then you finally get to the end of the day and you're like, oh my God, exhaustion. So like, what can you do? A cup of tea, take a bath, light some candles, do a meditation, wrap yourself in a warm blanket, watch your favorite show, read a good book, like making a list of all the different things you can do for the big emotions that you often feel. And then keeping that list like in your purse, in your journal, on your nightstand, so you can reference it to be like, okay, well, when I'm doing these things, when I'm feeling these things, what can I do? That's not to say that like if you're feeling deeply sad, a cup of tea will take away the sadness, but it is a coping mechanism. And remember, like I said in the beginning, that we don't just stop overeating. We don't just stop emotionally eating. we replace it with something else. And this is where that starts to really shift, because when you can have things you can do, you can allow the emotion to sort of run its course and to sort of really work and process through. So the fifth piece of this is, hi, Anne-Marie. So the fifth piece of this is having a plan in place and I'll explain that in a second, and learning how to express yourself. So, and this is a really, really, really big one, and one I could probably talk about for like 2 hours on, but I'm going to give you kind of the gist of it. In the sense, having a plan, meaning don't leave your, and I talk about this in a lot of my challenges, in a lot of my blogs, like set yourself up for success. So if you know that every day you get home from work and you sit on your couch and you want the ice cream, like make a plan. Like, okay, what are you going to do instead? Are you going to call someone? Are you going to clean your house? Are you going to sit with a good book? Are you going to go out to a bookstore and get yourself out of the house? Like, what are you going to do? Like having something in place where you can begin to know your triggers and plan accordingly. Let me see if I can think of a good example. I think for a lot of people, it is that nighttime kind of thing where, or work from home. This is a good one too. Like if you're working from home a lot and you're at home a lot, it's like the pantry's right there, the food's right there. You're kind of like, oh, what's going on in the refrigerator? So like, how do you plan for that? How do you like, and I remember this was probably in the very beginning of my business, but for some reason this is sticking out in my mind right now. I worked with a woman who moved from like working a crazy job in New York, who moved to, I think, Atlanta, and she was working from home, and she struggled because she was just home all day. She wasn't busy. She wasn't always on the run. She wasn't always in a meeting, and she was like, oh my God, I'm not busy, and I have no distractions, and like all I want to do is eat. And so it's like, how can you make a plan for that? Like maybe you go to a coffee shop 9 to 12 every morning and work there. Maybe you work with friends. Maybe you join a co-working space. I don't know, but it's like knowing what your triggers are and knowing when you get like antsy emotionally and want to eat and planning for that. And I will recap these steps, by the way. And this is a slash because I didn't want to have 6 steps. So this is kind of like 6 steps, but I felt like 6 was overwhelming and 5 seemed like a good number. So expressing yourself emotionally. And let me just tell you this, I am still learning that. I still make mistakes. I still like freak out or just verbal vomit, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that or said that, or and have to go apologize. So it's like learning to express yourself emotionally, meaning when you're angry, when you're lonely, when you're feeling like someone did something that wasn't okay, when someone did something that crossed your boundaries, when you want to say no. That's a big one. When you, like, us women, like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Oh sure. Oh yeah, no problem. We're like, oh, screw you. I can't believe you made me do that. And I shouldn't have, like blah, blah, blah. It's like, let's just say no. Again, something I'm working on. But learning how to express yourself emotionally is a big one. It can feel vulnerable. It can feel scary. It can feel like, oh my God, are they going to reject me? Are they going to, I'm working with a woman, actually, this is a really good example, who, the same thing, working on emotions. And for so much of her life, she was a people pleaser. She went along and, she just never expressed herself, never stood up for herself, and was just essentially the people pleaser. Always went above and beyond, always took care of everyone else. And she's now learning how to express herself and kind of, her brother booked a 10-day vacation at her house without asking her, and booked his flight and all this stuff. And she actually, in the past, she would have been like, oh my gosh, he shouldn't have done that, but then been resentful and gone to the food and been so angry the whole time and, going on and on. And she instead she spoke up to him and stood up and said, hey, that's not okay, actually. I know this has happened in the past, but this is my house, and I unfortunately, this is not okay, and you'll have to get a hotel. And it was like, it felt so uncomfortable. It felt so unfamiliar. She was terrified to do it. And that's how it feels at first. But let me tell you the big but here. But you then learn how to express your emotions and not go to the food. Like, that's the payoff. Like, the payoff is that you don't have to eat emotionally because you're learning how to express it outwardly instead of stuffing everything inwardly. So I hope that makes sense. And the learning how to express emotions is, when we're angry or when and not every emotion calls for, needing to talk to someone and needing to address it with someone. And I've learned this over the years. Like, I used to feel like every single thing I felt like had to be talked about. And then I realized, that was my journal was for sometimes. Like, just, writing in my journal about what I felt. Because, and let me be really honest here. So it took a long time for me to be okay with how emotional I am. And still sometimes I'm like, am I like normal, emotionally? Am I like, like sometimes I think I'm a little crazy. But I've learned that when I work on my emotions or when I journal or when I get things out, even if it's uncomfortable, and talk to someone or express it, it allows me not to eat over it. Not that I would eat over it at this point, but I think of expressing emotions as a daily cleaning or something, or daily, like brushing your teeth. You do it daily. It's not that you have to look at for 4 hours at your emotions, but it's like, every night I'll journal for 10 minutes just about like how I'm feeling, because sometimes we're so busy and things are going by so fast in our days, and we have so many to-dos and so many next things that we have to plan to achieve or to go on to or to check off. It's like we don't ever allow ourselves to get to the level of emotions, because emotions and clarity around emotions come when we're slowing down and when we're allowing it to come up and allowing ourselves to let it arise. So I have learned over the years that like we are emotional beings. Yes, some more than others, but it's okay to be emotional, and it's okay to have an incredible life and to still be sad or still to be, angry at something. Heather says, trying to join you live. I need to listen to this topic. My phone is not cooperating. Will this be up later too? Yes, this will be up forever. So it'll be in this group. So yeah, it'll be up. Okay, so to recap. Number 1, there's 5 little tips, strategies I want you to remember. And take what resonates. Take the steps that you're like, okay, I can work on this one. Like, this is the one I'm going to work on tonight, tomorrow, this week. Like, don't be like, I have to master all 5 today. It's like, baby steps. So pick something that really resonates, that really jumped out at you, and be like, all right, I'm going to work on that. And keep me posted. Let me know how it goes. Okay, so being willing to be uncomfortable. Understanding that when we put down the food, that was our comfort. That was familiar. That's what we know. So when we put that down, it will be uncomfortable. It's like, oh, well, what am I doing now that I'm not eating? Like, what's going on here? So being willing to be in that, it doesn't mean there's something wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's new, it's unfamiliar, and it will become more familiar as you keep doing it. Second, explore the feeling. Get into that feeling. Get out of your head and get into the feeling. Like, what does it feel like? Where is it in your body? Does it have a name? Is it a color? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Like sensory things like textures, tastes, colors, all that kind of stuff. Because when you get out of your head and explore that emotion physically, that's when the magic happens, because it can just be processed and released. Okay, the third piece, what is it that you're wanting to fulfill? And again, when I went into this on a deeper level, I had different sentences. So words matter here, so pick a question that resonates with you. Essentially, you're wanting to go deeper into what is it that you're deeply wanting the food to do. So if you ate, what would you want the food to do for you? What need is it fulfilling for you, essentially? Okay, so the fourth one is learning how to get those needs met. And I talked about the chart box you can do of feeling and then different options that kind of go-tos, just having something else besides food to go to create a new habit. Because when you're feeling something, like food is just our habit. Food is just what we do. So when we can get out of that habit and replace it with a new habit, that will become our new reaction. And I'm gonna be honest, like for me, journaling is a lot of my, like, I'll have coping mechanisms, but sometimes my head is just so muddled with thoughts and things that I'll just journal to like gain clarity around, okay, that's what I'm feeling. So if you're feeling confused about what you're feeling, or like what need is needing to be met, is that a thing? Is that a correct grammar? What need is wanting to be met? Journaling can help, or talking. I've had people do voice, like record on their voicemail because they don't like writing. I love writing or typing even, but I journal. So I think any one of those three can help you just gain clarity around what you're feeling. Okay, explore getting the needs met. Step 4, did I already say that one as a recap? Maybe I did. And then step 5 is a two-parter because I didn't want to have 6 steps. So having a plan in place and creating an action plan of like, okay, here's what I'm going to do next time I get home from work and I'm stressed out and I want to eat. Like, here's what I'm going to do. Like, write it out in your fridge, have it on your phone, put it on the counter. So you feel like you have something to turn to. And then the second piece of this is learning how to express your emotions. This could probably be like a whole other live video of expressing your emotions. But essentially, when you learn how to speak your truth, it's incredibly liberating because you're not stuffing it inside anymore. And that is like just a weight being lifted off you. And honestly, I remember when I first was like trying to express myself and like planning it in my head, like, this is what I'm going to say. Like, it would come out off the wall and just weird and like awkward. But I was just like, you know what? I can't keep things inside anymore. Like, I can't just go along. I can't be the people pleaser. I can't just like stuff everything because I would just eat over it. So know that that's the payoff. Like, know that when you begin to learn and practice and experiment with expressing your emotions, that's the payoff. You don't have to eat and you don't use the food anymore. Whew, my voice is getting all raspy now. I've had some clients and I've been talking for like hours. So I'm so glad you've joined me. And this will be up. So if you have any questions later and you're watching this the replay, pop them in the chat box. I'll be happy to answer. And yes, thanks so much for coming live, and I will talk to you soon.